Well, the Christmas season is upon us. And I don't know what you call the official beginning of Christmas season, but it's just kind of like we're different how we recognize it. I mean, for me, it seems like when we start passing out the names for helping the children in our community, that just really makes it come alive. Or it's the Christmas drama. It's just kind of like the official kickoff, and everybody sees it different how we do that. You can also tell by how busy that things get, that Christmas season is here. And there are a lot of messages of Christmas. People trying to tell us what Christmas is all about. And most of those things are not bad things. But we just have to be so careful that we get the right focus at Christmas. And I think that's why I'm so excited about this series that we're doing here in December called The Heart of Christmas. And that's where we're going to take a look at 4 different things that really are the heart of Christmas, so what makes them, where our focus should be. And if you've noticed, people use words and churches do Advent, that's the coming, and the elements of that is what we're looking at, those 4 elements of Christmas. And today we begin with hope, hope and how its role in defining what Christmas is. And you might just be wondering right now, if I'm going to talk about hope and Christmas, why would I show a crazy video clip from a crazy movie called Dumb and Dumber? Because I think it captures exactly what we want to point out about hope. That it's not the worldly hope that we see like this. You're telling me there's a chance, it's 1 in a million chance or whatever it is. No, biblical hope is what we're talking about. A certainty of something not yet seen. That's what biblical hope is. A certainty about something, even though we haven't seen it yet. And this is not a sermon per se about hope, but it's about hope that came in the birth of Jesus. The birth of Jesus is the fulfilling of prophecy. And that's one of the amazing things that can get overlooked at Christmas, is that we get so busy in what Christmas is all about that we forget has so much prophecy built into it. What was said about the coming child hundreds of years before Jesus was born. Probably the most widely read Old Testament prophet and prophecy about the birth of Jesus is found in Isaiah. And we're going to be reading that here in just a few minutes. But it's good to set some context. As Isaiah was writing, he was writing during a time that Israel was in terrible shape. And I know what you're thinking. When was Israel not in terrible shape? As soon as they started turning away from God, things became bad in that nation. But they're being pursued by foreign powers. They're a remnant or just a shell of what they used to be. And they're going through some very tough times simply because of their sin and how it had led the nation away from God. So we're going to pick up in Isaiah chapter 9, starting with verse 2. And it says this. The people walking in darkness have seen a great light. On those living in the land of the shadow of death, a light has dawned. Now, I want to pause here just a second. Here in chapter 9, it's kind of like the pivot point. If you go back, and you really need to do this, it's go back and read some of the chapters leading up to 9. Isaiah points out a lot of the bad things that have happened. But here it's like a pivot point, and he says, the people who have been walking in darkness have seen a great light. He goes on in verse 3. You have enlarged the nation and increased their joy. They rejoice because you as people rejoice, as you as people rejoice at the harvest, as men rejoice when dividing the plunder. Verse 4, for as in the day of Midian's defeat, you have shattered the yoke that burdens them, the bar across their shoulders, the rod of their oppressor. Every warrior's boot used in battle and every garment rolled in blood will be destined for burning, will be fuel for the fire. And I know that's kind of hard just to jump right into and say, man, what's Isaiah talking about? He's giving the idea of how things are going to change, how things are going to change, and war and bloodshed and oppression from other nations, how that's no longer going to be. He goes on to verse 6 and says this. For to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government will be on his shoulders. And he'll be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and peace there will be no end. He will reign on David's throne and over his kingdom, establishing and upholding it with justice and righteousness from that time on and forever. The zeal of the Lord Almighty will accomplish this. And all of the bad that he's pointed out and all the good that he says, he ends it by saying, this is going to happen because of the efforts of God. The zeal of the Lord. Now, some of this might sound strange to you, and it's hard to understand, and I get that. But that's a lot of times where when you read prophecy from that old, it's hard to get a grasp on the start of it, but you understand this. Israel was a mess. Israel was a mess at this time. The people of Israel had suffered through one bad king after the other who just continued to lead them away from God. There was oppression from other nations trying to take them over. Their own government and their own priesthood was corrupt. It was a very dark time in history. And Isaiah wrote these words on God's behalf so the people would know that God had not forgotten them. You have not been forgotten. You know, as we look at Isaiah, there's several things that come out of these passages. And the first thing is that you have to acknowledge the sin. Israel had to first say, we're broken. We're living in darkness. And they realized that. And if I might just interject here, when I look at our country, that's exactly where we are. That we are so far from God, but we will not admit it. Our leaders, our cultural leaders, just will not admit that things are not working. So they just keep pouring more and more that doesn't work, saying someday it will work. No. The first thing we have to do as a nation, as a community, as individuals is admit what I'm doing isn't working. I've got to come out of the darkness into the light and go God's way. And the second is this, that hope is dawning. The hope of a dawning light through the birth of a child is going to happen. It's going to take place. The Jewish people of the Old Testament, they needed this message. They needed these words that they were not forgotten. In the New Testament, Matthew does the same thing as he's telling the story. Matthew chapter 1, verses 22 and 23, he says, all this took place, talking about the plan unfolding for the birth of Jesus. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will be with child and will give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. Matthew is reminding the people that this is not an accident, this isn't just something that happened, but that even in the darkest times, God had a plan, and he was going to bring it together through the birth of the Savior. And it was a dark time when Jesus was actually born. It was a dark time in history, but still it didn't stop him from being born. That's the first point I want to make, is that darkness always threatens our hope. Darkness threatens our hope. That's why in Isaiah 9 it starts right off when he says, the people walking in darkness have seen a great light. Light changes things. I've probably said this at some time in a sermon before, that my very first car was a 1967 Mercury Cougar. Had the stick shift in the floor, console, bucket seats. It was one nice ride. It was better than what I deserved at 17 years old. But one cool thing about that car was that even in 1967, this is 1967 technology, it had the hideaway headlights. What that meant was when you turned the lights on, the cover came up and the lights came on. So, you know, when you turned the lights off, they folded and covered up. And that was really cool. There was only one drawback. Sometimes, on their own accord, they would close at night. So you could just be driving down the road and they just flip closed. You know, and so the lights were still on, but they were covered up. That made for some adventurous driving. You know, that kept you on your toes. You know, they're going to stay closed for a second, 2 seconds, 10 seconds, whatever it was. The light was still on, but it was covered up. Darkness is a threatening thing to us. It causes a lot of things that we do easily in light, in daylight, become much more difficult. It makes things we have to do in the darkness that we can do in light. It makes them not only difficult, but also dangerous. One of the things we like to do, and you notice, we try to drive away darkness. We put up security lights around our buildings and our parking lots and our homes, put up motion lights that if it senses somebody out there, a motion, it turns the lights on so it'll light up the things. We're constantly trying to drive away darkness. And I think that one of the reasons Christmas continues just to resonate with us is that we know that we live in a dark time, that we can see the darkness around us, just like Israel could. And it says they've seen a great light. When we look around us, there's corruption, there's evil, there's war, disease, more reports of war coming, more diseases coming, more conflict, more oppression. And we too just need to know that hope is coming, that hope has come through Jesus Christ, through his birth. And it's going to push back the darkness no matter what time and what circumstance we live in. This past Thursday, I went back to Martinsville, just a day trip, drove up, went to a funeral, and came back. And as I was driving on the interstate on the other side of Raleigh, you know how crazy and busy it is, and I was in the left lane, it was 2 cars in front of me, and I could see that the next lane over, it was a huge box laying in the road. And I could see it, and I said, but I'm okay, I'm in the left lane. But the second car in line couldn't see the box and pulled out to pass. And they nailed that box and I'm talking about, I don't know what was in the box, but it went into 1,000 pieces. There was styrofoam going everywhere, cardboard, pieces of wood, and I'm just already drawn up. And thankfully, when I ran through it, it all went under my truck. Nothing was hitting the windshield or anything, but it was going through. And it just reminded me, I thought about, sometimes we get in trouble and we had nothing to do with it. Sometimes we bring the dark times in our lives on ourselves. It's the decisions we make, the places we go, the things we're doing, and we find ourselves in very dark places, and it's our fault. Sometimes it's just a box in the road. That somebody else's problem became my problem, and now I have to deal with what happened. But no matter which way it is, it's still a darkness. It's still something that has to be dealt with. And hope is the same for no matter which one you're in. There's hope that there can be a time when all those things are dealt with. You see, it's not just a darkness threatened us, but God's presence, Emmanuel, gives us hope. Jesus coming gives us hope. And the hard part about hope is we have to wait. When you have hope, you're still waiting. You're waiting for the fulfillment. You have a certainty of those things coming true, but you're still waiting. And waiting is hard. Some of us wait better than others, but waiting is hard. I hadn't thought about these people in, decades, but when I was living in Virginia and minister up there, there was a old elderly couple in our church named Willie and Dora Cook. And they did everything together. They were just inseparable. And I remember that Dora had to have surgery. And so I was at the hospital with Willie while she was in surgery. And the doctor came in and said, hey, she did fine. She's out of surgery. When she gets out of recovery, she'll be back in her room. So if you want to go on up to her room, you can wait. She'll be there. And I remember Willie and I got in the elevator. And there's this little old man. Loved his wife so much. You can't make an elevator go faster. There's nothing you can do to make an elevator go faster. But I was watching Willie out of the corner of my eye. He was just going. He was wanting to speed that elevator up because he wanted to get up there to his wife. Waiting's hard. And there's really nothing we can do to speed it up, but there are things that we can do to help us wait as we wait. And one of the most important things is developing a healthy biblical hope is to depend on looking back at the past And that sounds contradictory that we're hoping for the future, but look at the past. Let me tell you what I mean. When we look to the past, we are able to stand strong in the present, knowing that the future is assured. Paul kind of tied all three of those together, what he said in Romans 15:4. For everything that was written in the past, and at this point, he's got to be talking about the Old Testament, because they're living the New Testament right now. These are the writings that will go into the New Testament. So he's talking about the Old Testament. He said, for everything that was written in the past was written to teach us, so that through endurance and encouragement means just to give courage, encouragement of the Scriptures, say those last four words with me, we might have hope. Let that sink in for just a second. And Paul is saying all of the things, all of the prophecies, all of the experiences, all the things that we can learn, all that we've seen God has already done, he says they're there for us so that they teach us so that we can live strong. We look at the past, that it gives us courage in the present, the endurance, stand strong as we look for the future. A lot of you guys have been able to come to the men's once a month Bible study that we have. There's a number of them meet around the county. It's called Shop Church, and I call ours Barbecue Church because we meet at Andy's Barbecue Kitchen. But meet there once a month. There's always a great meal. There's always somebody who speaks and teaches or speaks. And then one of the things that's really overlooked, I think, in my mind, is at the end, we always talk about who's somebody that needs a little financial help. And they'll share some ideas, and the offering that we take up just gets delivered to them. And say, hey, this is from some guys who wanted to help you out. This past time, it was somebody that I've never met, and everybody in that room except one person never met. It's a young father who has stage 4 cancer. And all one of the guys had to do was share about his friend. And they said, I think that'd be a great person to help. And when I got home, the guy that we sent the money with, it was his friend, he texted me, he says, Greg, that was $428 that we took up. And that's just a little small group of men. But it's like that every time we meet. Now, is $428 going to fix that young man's problems? No. But it's my hope, and I think the hope of everybody in that room is that maybe to give them a little encouragement. Maybe that'll let them know to stand strong, that there are people who care, and God's still working. And don't give up hope. That's how it helped me that night, by being able to be in that group. And we hope the same for them. You see, the past, the present, and it gives us hope in the future. For what? Hope that God is going to continue to do what he said he was going to do. C.S. Lewis, the great writer, wrote, he said, the Christians who did the most for the present world were those who thought most of the next world. The ones who did the most and do the most for this world are the ones who live thinking of the next world. The apostles, their mind was on heaven, but they spread the gospel to the whole known world. I think about in the Middle Ages when the Bible wasn't available to average people, and people like Tyndale and others, they translated the Bible into the English language, knowing they were going to be killed because and every one of them that translated were end up burned at the stake, crucified, persecuted and killed. But they did it looking forward to another world. I think about in Europe as those who led the fight to abolish slavery, and they bravely fought that battle because they knew it was a terrible thing, and they led the fight to end those things. But their mind was on heaven. But they did so much for the world. C.S. Lewis went on and said, aim at heaven and you'll get earth thrown in. Aim at earth and you will get neither. That's why it is so important to remember that at the heart of Christmas is hope. At the heart of Christmas is hope. It's not a Dumb and Dumber kind of hope, so you're telling me there's a chance. No, it's not the shallow hope where we pat somebody on the back and just say, oh, everything's going to be all right. No, we're talking about the hope that came in the gift of Jesus, born in a manger, Emmanuel, God with us. And when we strip away everything else about Christmas, Jesus is not just the center of Christmas, he is Christmas. He is hope. He is the light. Without him, there is nothing to celebrate. There is no Christmas to celebrate. You know, in a congregation our size, someone knows the experience and it knows the pain of divorce. Someone knows and has experienced the pain of being a survivor of abuse. Someone knows the experience of having to live with depression or crippling anxiety. Someone knows the experience of just needing to heal from something that has happened in the past and how hard that is. Someone knows the experience of losing a loved one, and who knows, this may be the first Christmas, the 5th Christmas, the 20th Christmas, but you know the pain of that. Someone knows the pain and the battle of fighting an addiction. Darkness is real. And it's not just a darkness that's out there, it's a darkness that can come into our hearts, that can come into our lives. And if we're honest with ourselves, we battle with that as well. The poet Dean Young put it so well. He said, you start with the darkness to move through, and then the darkness moves through you. Darkness is real, but we have seen a great light. We've seen a great light in the coming of Jesus. And that's why hope is so important. It's not just important, it's crucial, it's essential. And as we prepare for Christmas, I hope you can build your hope on that truth. G.K. Chesterton, preacher and author, wrote this. He said, there's no medicine like hope, no incentive so great, and no tonic so powerful as the expectation of something better tomorrow. If you're already a Christian here, you know you put your hope in Jesus Christ, and you know what that's like. You know what that experience is. That you live knowing that no matter what you go through, there's a better tomorrow because of Jesus Christ. And if you're here and have not given your life to Jesus Christ, that can change today from hopelessness to hope by giving your life to Him. And from this day forward, you live a life of a certainty of the future. It's that simple when you give your life to Him.